The great state of Texas, Mr. Chip Roy, for 3 minutes.
I thank the chairman. I applaud the chairman and the work of the committee for bringing forward legislation here, a budget that will balance in 10 years, which people say we can't do. I would note that all my colleagues have rattled through all the numbers that we face. $34.4 trillion of debt, $1 trillion every 100 days, $1 trillion in interest in 2026, more spending on interest in the defense this year. I mean, I just wonder at what point we're going to get serious on both sides of the aisle of addressing this issue, because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will hide behind taxes, and it's just frankly just not legitimate at all. And colleagues on this side of the aisle, frankly, will also hide behind not touching taxes and hide behind, well, mandatory spending, this thing over here, but we can't deal with discretionary. We'll deal with mandatory, but we don't ever have a plan. And this budget tries to break that and force us to the table. I applaud the chairman for putting taxes on the table. They should be on the table. Not because I think we're lacking revenue, and it's just the one thing that I really want my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to at least answer and say, okay, revenues to the Treasury were 19.6% 2 years ago. Federal revenues as a percentage of GDP. That's as high as it's ever been. Can we at least acknowledge that truth and go, okay, that truth exists? It's dropped off to about 17.5%, I think, in this last go round. That's the norm. That's the norm that it's been since before World War II. So can we just dispense with this notion of the tax breaks for the rich is leaving us all sort of hosed? It's just false. Flat out 100% false. Equally false is the notion that Republicans are going to adhere to this budget. They won't. They didn't yesterday. That's the simple truth. We passed caps a year ago, and we've already busted them. That's who we are as a body. That's what's become of this institution. We either want to pass a framework and do the tough work of dealing with tax policy, dealing with spending restraint, addressing the tough issues of mandatory spending, and not hide behind it with all the political rhetoric that people are going to die and people are going to starve, as if the country can't exist without certain programs in place in Washington. We're either going to honestly address these issues or we're not. But to then pass something in a budget that we don't adhere to is a fraud perpetrated on the American people. So let's do our work. Let's pass a budget. Let's adhere to it. Let's do better than it and do the work the American people sent us here to do. I yield back.
Everybody seek to claim time in opposition.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Roy, from the great state of Texas, I yield 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. I do seek time in opposition with all due respect from the gentlelady from California, with whom I'm happy to work on, for example, ending 20-year-old authorizations of the use of military force, and that we need to re-engage on that. Happy to work with you on that. And look, on this issue, my father worked for the Internal Revenue Service for about 24 years, I think, which, you know, kind of odd for a, you know, conservative from Texas, but my dad moved here. He actually worked right down here, 1111 Constitution Avenue, and the work of the IRS is important to carry out the function it is charged to carry out. The expansion of the IRS under the so-called Inflation Reduction Act will have a disproportionate impact on people that do not have significant means. That's just the data from the IRS's own data. The number of audits that will be directed by their estimates, the IRS, on people who make significantly less, say under 100,000. You've got hundreds of thousands of Americans that would be dealing with the audits of the plussed up power given to the Internal Revenue Service. There's nothing in the IRA that limits those targets, by the way. It has some findings language that talks about it being focused on above $400,000, but there's no statutory requirement on that. But even so, I mean, the fact of the matter is roughly, and these are ballpark numbers, they change by the year, you know, the top 1% of the population is paying about 40% of the taxes. So I'm not sure what the fair share here is. If anybody over there can tell me on the Laffer curve or any other curve you want to put out economically about what tax rates yield the most revenue, if that is your goal in the first place, I don't think anybody in this room knows. I don't think anybody in this room knows what rates yield the maximum revenue. So then we've got the IRS here, and I'm going to yield to my friend from Utah here in just a minute. This bill is just simply empowering the IRS to go after large number of American citizens. And that, I think, is not something that is in the best interest of the people. The IRS audits the poor at 5 times the rate of everyone else. That's that bastion of conservatism, CBS News. New York Times, black taxpayers at least 3 times as likely to be audited by the Internal Revenue Service. The basic point is so-called tax cheats can afford accountants and lawyers to manage a highly complex tax code, which is my last point. If we want to solve this problem, simplify the code, make it to where it is much more difficult to navigate that with tax lawyers and accountants, and let's get busy doing the work we need to do to get our fiscal house in order. And I would yield to the gentleman from Utah.
I thank the gentleman and my good friend from Texas. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit an analysis of the Economic Policy Innovation Center regarding the IRS revenue collections into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Much shorter title. I want to make three quick points to continue on with the data that my colleague, Mr. Roy, has shared. One, to the 7 Americans outside the Beltway watching our committee hearing right now. That's not a joke at the ratings we're going to get, but sincerely, I wish the American people could know kind of one of the plays that you do when you create legislation back here, and both sides do it. We have to deal with CBO scores, and so in the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed on party line votes, Democrats needed something to be able to lessen the score of that massively expensive bill, and so they included this IRS funding, and with the plan that if we include a bunch of IRS funding, we're going to be able to grow the revenue. Unsurprisingly, it isn't working. According to the data from the IRS, the agency collected $160 million in revenues in FY23 attributable to the IRA. They originally expected to collect $2.9 billion. That's 5.5% of what the expectation was. Through Q1 of 2024, the IRS collected $360 million. This is just 5% off its goal, its expectation to collect $7.8 billion of revenues in FY24. Attributed to that. Folks, the whole IRS funding piece from the IRA was just to create a pay-for so the CBO would lower what the cost of the IRA was, which is actually now twice as expensive as it was expected to be. Like, let's just be honest with each other. I represent some of the hardest working IRS employees. I wish your dad would have been in Ogden. He would have loved to have been in Ogden near Snow Basin and all the other amenities of that great state. We should be focusing on making sure they have what they need, the tools they need to do their job. They have some of the worst customer service capabilities. They have some of the worst technology. They're trying to ramp that up. And Ways and Means we just hosted and had the commissioner on. And we talked extensively about the work that they're trying to do. That's the area we focus. Give them the tools to do their job, and then we'll talk about workforce and what's needed to just plus that up. But don't do it for some CBO gimmick. Like, the American people need to be able to see through that.